Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Hockey Talk with TG Podcast. I'm Ty Glenn. Hopefully, you guys are having a great Wednesday. Got lots of NHL news to discuss, so make sure that you stay tuned in to this episode until the end. I know it's been a while since I put out an episode of the Hockey Talk with TG Podcast. Just kind of been busy and doing other stuff and kind of forgot to be putting out episodes. And also, um, part of that was me finishing up exams for school, which that's over with now, obviously. And also just kind of been the other part of that was me forgetting to put out episodes of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. And so much hockey stuff has happened of late, and I'm going to discuss it all with you guys on this episode of Hockey Talk TG Podcast. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started into the hockey news for today. We'll start things off with Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Playoffs between the Montreal Canadiens and Buffalo Sabres from last night. So the Montreal Canadiens hold on for a 3-2 overtime win over the Buffalo Sabres in Game 7 Monday night. And Alex Newhook, of course it's Alex Newhook, scores the overtime game-winning goal in the Canadiens' 3-2 overtime win over the Buffalo Sabres in Game 7 on Monday. Second game-winning goal of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and also coming in a Game 7 victory. Of course, we've seen him score the game-winning goal in Game 7 of the Canadiens' first-round series against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now he does it here again, this time against the Buffalo Sabres. Score with 8 minutes and 38 seconds remaining in overtime, and what a nice play it was from Alexander Carrier to do a cross-ice pass to Alex Newhook, and he shoots it from the left circle, low glove, past Ukko Pekka for the overtime game-winning goal. He's up to 7 goals of the Stanley Cup playoffs so far, and the Montreal Canadiens, for the first time since 2021, will advance to the conference finals, and they will play the Carolina Hurricanes in the conference finals, the Eastern Conference Finals, that is. Game 1 of that series will be in Carolina on Thursday night at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Time on TNT, True TV, and HBO Max. In fact, all the Eastern Conference Finals games will be on TNT, True TV, and HBO Max, whereas the Western Conference Finals series will be on ESPN, ESPN Plus. So just to show you guys each schedule of it, I'm gonna share my screen with you guys, so I can show you guys the schedule for both the West and Eastern Conference Finals, and I'll probably show it again sometime throughout this episode of Hockey Talk TG Podcast. That is, if you are watching/listening on YouTube. So this is the Eastern Conference Final schedule. So like I said, all games will be on TNT for you guys to watch, and also HBO Max as well. And then we got the Western Conference Finals between the Golden Knights and Colorado Avalanche, and all those games will be on ESPN, ESPN Plus, ABC for you guys to watch. So, yeah. So just want to show you guys that. I kind of might show it again sometime throughout this episode of the Hockey Talk to You podcast, maybe as we wrap up our discussions for today's episode of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. Fun fact about Alex Newhook: he is the second player in NHL history to score multiple Game 7 series clinching goals in a single postseason, joining Nathan Horton, who did it with the Boston Bruins back in 2011 when the Boston Bruins won the Stanley Cup against the Vancouver Canucks. Philip Deneau and Zachary Bolduc scored for the Canadiens in this one. Jakub Dobes made 37 saves on 39 shots faced the net. Now, at the start of this series, I did say that this will be a coin flip to see who will win the series between the Buffalo Sabres and the Montreal Canadiens. But another thing that I said was it was all going to come down to goaltending, because as you look at these teams, going into game one of that series between Sabres and Canadiens, they were evenly matched. They were two young, talented teams. Lots of young talent on both sides of the teams. Sabres, I did say before at the start of the series, Sabres kind of had, well, I wouldn't say the better offense or so, but they were just so evenly matched. It was like a coin flip to see who's going to win that series. But one thing I also said besides that was it was all going to come down to goaltending. Jakub Dobes, I said that Jakub Dobes remains perfect from round one and when he performed well against Tampa Bay Lightning. The Canadiens have a shot at winning this series against the Sabres. But if the Sabres goaltending does well, and I know throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs, including round two. They switched up goalies between Ukko Pekka and Alex Newhook. They didn't know who's going to be their true number one starting goaltender of the playoffs. But I did say if the Sabres goaltending somehow, some way, finds a way to be perfect in this round two series against Montreal, then they will have a shot at winning this series. So that series came down to goaltending, and Jakub Dobes uh, proved his dominance yet again in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So goaltending was the deciding factor between the Sabres and Canadiens. Like I said, two evenly matched teams. Both teams lost of young talent. Both teams with great offense. Defense, I don't know. Based on how this series went, obviously got to give it to the Canadiens. But going into that series, no, I thought the Sabres had the better defense. But based on how this series turned out, I had to give it to the Canadiens. So, but goaltending was the deciding factor of this series. So that's another thing I said. But great series, nonetheless. Probably the best series, or one of the best series so far of the Stanley Cup playoffs. For the Sabres, Rasmus Dahlin and Jordan Greenway scored for the Sabres. Ukko Pekka made 22 saves on 25 shots faced in net. And the Sabres' Cinderella season has come to an end. And, what a season it has been for the Buffalo Sabres. Most of us, including myself, were not expecting this team to be in the Stanley Cup playoffs. We weren't expecting them to be in playoff contention. Like we thought this was going to be another year with the Sabres. Missed out on the Stanley Cup playoffs, but it turns out we were wrong about that. Unless you are a Buffalo Sabres fan or hopping on the Sabres wagon or so. But yeah, what a season it has been for the Buffalo Sabres. They returned to the playoffs for the first time since 2011. Finished first in the Atlantic Division with a 23-9 record. And this was after they went 11-14-4 in their first 29 games of the season. And this was back on December 8th of 2025. They were last in the Eastern Conference at the time, but they followed up on their last 53 games with a 39-9-5 record in their last 53 games. So they really had a huge turnaround this season and got into the Stanley Cup playoffs. But nonetheless, this kind of remains another heartbreak for Buffalo sports fans. And I say another heartbreak because this was back in January in the NFL. This was during the NFL playoffs. The Bills were going against the Broncos, and the Bills had a heartbreaking 33-30 loss to the Denver Broncos. And Josh Allen, I watched that post game interview. He was so emotional in his post game interview. Kind of had the red eyes. Um, was crying a little bit, I believe, but he was like so emotional to how that season had ended for the Bills. And I don't know too much about football. Um, I watched the NFL playoffs this year because the Bears went in and they were going against the Packers and the Rams. So that's when I started watching it and stuff. But I don't know too much about football. I do know a little bit about it, but not too much. But I just remember that post game interview with Josh Allen, and he was emotional in that interview after the Bills lost to the Broncos. And the Sabres, probably some of them were emotional in their interview too after losing to the Canadiens in the second round of these Stanley Cup playoffs. But yeah, just a tough pill to swallow if you're a Sabres fan, and overall, if you were a Buffalo sports fan, like even if you don't watch hockey on a regular basis. You're not a fan of it, but you love watching the Stanley Cup playoffs. You love watching the Buffalo Sabres, though every blue moon, especially considering the fact that they were in the Stanley Cup playoffs, you have to feel a little bit of a heartbreak as well. It's kind of like me with football. Like, I don't like football as much. I don't like football, not into football. The only reason why I watch because the Bears win the playoffs. And for people who aren't into hockey as much, they might watch it because the Sabres win the playoffs. That is, if you're living in Buffalo, New York, and you're a Buffalo sports fan. Me, I'm a Chicago sports fan. And I watched the Bears when they were in the playoffs against the Packers. And that was a great game between the Bears and the Packers because two teams with a long history against each other, rivals. And I watched it because they were facing off against the Packers and they were in the playoffs, and then they unfortunately lost to the Rams. Um, and yeah, so so I kind of felt emotional because of that. And I'm pretty sure if, like I said, if you are a non-hockey fan or you don't watch hockey on a regular basis, you probably might feel the same way about the Buffalo Sabres. But I'm going to share some 3 key takeaways that the Sabres had this season. So, like I said before, they had one of the biggest turnarounds um, this season, probably the best in their franchise history. Like I said, in November or December, if you would have asked me if the Buffalo Sabres were going to make the Stanley Cup playoffs, I would have said no. Along with 95% of the hockey fans. I would have said no. If you would have asked me around November or December 2025 if the Buffalo Sabres were going to make the Stanley Cup playoffs, no, they will not make the Stanley Cup playoffs. But they shocked the hockey world. They shocked their fans, and they returned to Stanley Cup playoffs for the first time since 2011. And that run to the playoffs had to be what a dominant December it was for them because they went 25-5-2. They had a 25-5-2 stretch beginning in December. And then, of course, overall for their last 39 games or so, or 53 games, excuse me, they finished with a 39-9-5 record. And then overall, the season total record was 50-23-9 with 109 points. First in the Atlantic Division, snapping a 14-year playoff drought. Like out of the NBA, out of the NFL, out of the NHL, out of the MLB, the Buffalo Sabres had the longest playoff drought, but that finally came to an end this season. And I think now, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, among NBA, NFL, NHL, and MLB, the New York Jets of the NFL have the longest playoff drought. And I think right next to them, maybe the Los Angeles Angels, maybe the Detroit Red Wings. I'm not sure, but you can correct me in the comments if I got that statement wrong. But yeah, just a heck of a season it was for the Buffalo Sabres to return back to Stanley Cup playoffs. Even with them getting eliminated in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, I think Sabres fans, even though they didn't like the way it ended, and I saw in the third period, like they had a goal that they thought should have counted, but this was something I saw on Instagram. This is something I saw on social media. The whistle had blew. The puck did squeak past Jakub Dobes, and then one of the Sabres players touched the puck after the whistle blew. And this was the post I saw. Like with that puck going by Jakub Dobes and with the whistle blowing, if that Sabres player did not touch the puck, it would have ended up counting as a goal. But because he touched the puck, it ended up not counting as a goal. So that's why the official waved it off even with the whistle blowing, because he touched the puck. And this was an Instagram post I saw. Let me show you guys the post. To me, it made no sense, and it made no sense to me though, and it probably doesn't make sense to you guys either. But that's what I saw on Instagram. That's what I heard. Um, that's what I heard about the controversial goal. So let me show you guys this Instagram post right here. That's where I saw it. So this was from BR Open Ice, Bleacher Report Open Ice. According to Dave Jackson, if the Sabres player did not knock this in, it would have counted even with the whistle being blown. So it's crazy to think about, but it is what it is. If I was a Sabres fan, I would not have liked that, but that is a crazy rule. I never heard of that rule before in all my years of watching hockey. I've never heard of that rule before. So apparently, like if he had not touched the puck with the whistle blowing, this would have been a good goal, and the Sabres maybe could have won this game and won the series against the Montreal Canadiens. But that that play right there had cost them. Let me see. Try and mute this. Let's see. Yeah, this play ended up costing them. So the whistle blows, and Sabres celebrate. They think it's a goal, but the referee automatically waves it off. But if he had not touched it, if he had not got a stick on it, that would have counted as a goal. Everybody thought that was going to be a good goal, but it ended up not counting as a goal. So, yeah, it is what it is. And then, yeah, so Sabres, great season it was. Number two takeaway, I would probably say, is that they prove that they can play playoff hockey. When they faced off against the Boston Bruins, a lot of people had the Buffalo Sabres winning that series against Boston. I couldn't understand it because for most of these players on the Buffalo Sabres, this was their first appearance in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Alex Tuck, I'm naming the guys who were in the playoffs before. That's on the Sabres. Alex Tuck, he went on the Stanley Cup run with the Vegas Golden Knights in 2018. Bo Byram, he won the Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche in 2022. And I think those were the only players I can think of that aren't new to these Stanley Cup playoffs. But for most of those guys on the Sabres, Rasmus Dahlin, Tage Thompson, Zach Benson, Kostas Helenius, Ukko Pekka um, most of those guys, that was their first ever playoff appearance. First ever playoff appearance. And I didn't think they can get it done against Boston because of that. The Sabres, and like I said, the Sabres only had a few guys on their team that have been in the playoffs before, won the Stanley Cup before. Like I said, Alex Tuck, he won on the 2018 Stanley Cup run with Vegas. Bo Byram won on the Stanley Cup run with the Avalanche in 2022, won the Stanley Cup with them that year. Alex Linen, he was in the playoffs before with the Florida Panthers in 2023. He was the backup goalie to Sergei Bobrovsky. And then who else? I think that's pretty much all I can think of for the NHL players on the Sabres that have already been in these Stanley Cup playoffs. And another thing from this young team was the depth was fully on display. Like you had Zach Benson stepping up, you had Josh Stone stepping up, you had Bo Byram stepping up, Peyton Krebs, Rasmus Dahlin. Rasmus Dahlin finished the season with finished the playoffs rather with 14 points in 13 playoff games. So that's captaincy right there. That's I don't know if that's a word or not, but uh, that's the leader of a true captain right there. So he definitely stood up among the most players on the team in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I think Game 6 of the second round series between the Canadiens and the Sabres was a perfect example of that. It was an 8-3 win for the Buffalo Sabres, and I think about at least 11 players had a point in that Game 6 win. 8-3 win for the Sabres in Game 6 against the Habs to force a Game 7 um, of the second round series. So the depth was fully on display throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. But I think if the Sabres will, if they want to be a true, legitimate Stanley Cup contender, I think they're going to have consistency in there because, like I said before, throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs, they have switched up with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. They have switched up with Alex Lydon. And they couldn't find out who their true number one goaltender was. So they couldn't find out who was going to be the actual starter, who was going to be the actual backup. It was just like back and forth between Alex Lydon and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen in that. And don't want to have the problems that, and I'm not saying the Sabres don't have the problems like the Oilers did. The Oilers did in 2024, I believe. They couldn't find consistency in that. Either 2024 or 2025, one of those years they went to the Stanley Cup final against the Florida Panthers. One of the problems for them was consistency in that, and they couldn't find it. And I'm not saying the Sabres have the same problems like the Oilers do. But I think consistency in that is one thing that you're going to have to fix if you're the Buffalo Sabres, if you want to be a Stanley Cup contender, because this team has not made the conference finals since 2007, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Um, and I think just having consistency in that will, really help. Because their offense and defense was good, but they, kept switching up between Ausline and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, and I think that's what cost them. And yeah, overall thoughts on this though. Great series. Like I said, this set's got to be one of my top 3, top 5 favorite series so far throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. Throughout the first round, second round, conference finals, even though the conference finals haven't started yet, but game 1 between Vegas and Colorado will be Wednesday today at 7:00 p.m. Central Time. But between the first round, second round, I think Sabres Canadiens has to be my top 5 favorite series to watch throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. So great series between these two teams. Sabres, the future is bright for them. They have a bright future ahead of them. This is not the end of the Buffalo Sabres. They could maybe, and I'm saying maybe because I don't know if they will return to the Stanley Cup playoffs next year because I think one of the teams in the Atlantic Division and one of the teams in the Eastern Conference that I feel like will make a return to the Stanley Cup playoffs next year is the Florida Panthers because they'll have a healthy Alexander Barkov who's playing in the World Championship right now for Finland. First game back for him, first hockey game back for him in general since the 2025 Stanley Cup Final. They'll have a healthy Alexander Barkov next season. They'll have a healthy Matthew Tkachuk next season, even though Matthew Tkachuk did play part of the Florida Panthers regular season games this season, but in the first half, he was out with an injury or surgery or so, and they missed their top 2 players at the start of the season. But next season, Florida Panthers are back in the Stanley Cup playoffs, so they're one of the Atlantic Division teams and overall one of the teams in the Eastern Conference I feel like will make a return to the Stanley Cup playoffs. Not sure if Buffalo will be in that conversation though for me, but it was a great run this season for the Buffalo Sabres. First time since 2011 that the Sabres returned to the Stanley Cup playoffs, and that building, KeyBank Center, was loud on its feet for playoff hockey. These fans have waited a long time to see playoff hockey back in Buffalo, and they finally got it. So even though I'm speaking to Sabres fans, your team got eliminated by Canadiens, but the future is bright for you guys. You guys have a bright future ahead of yourselves, and it's been unveiled. You should feel happy, even though it's not the ending that you wanted. But even though it's not the ending that you wanted, you should still be happy that you got to see Buffalo Sabres playoff hockey. I feel like even with me, I'm a Blackhawks fan. And of course, we had Stanley Cup success. We had playoff success before. Um, but if I was a Sabres fan, I'd still be happy that we got that Sabres got to see playoff hockey because it's been a long time in the making. We even got to see Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills there hyping up the crowd um, for one of their Stanley Cup playoff games. We got to see Rob Gronkowski there. We got to see a whole bunch of other people there at KeyBank Center hyping up the Sabres and being in attendance for their playoff games. And Buffalo is indeed a hockey city. They are one of the most passionate fan bases um, in the league. So they love the Sabres. They love playoff hockey. They love to see them back in the playoffs. They got the chance to see that. They should be happy for that. Yes, you can be sad for the ending. But overall, though, you should be happy that you got to see playoff hockey back in Buffalo. You guys might return to the Stanley Cup playoffs next season, and that is a strong, strong, strong might. As of right now, I don't know if I see it. I don't know if I see it happening. I think the Florida Panthers are going to, and I know that this kind of has nothing to do with the Buffalo Sabres, but both teams are playing the Atlantic Division. Both teams are in the Eastern Conference, so that's why I keep mentioning them. I think the Florida Panthers, they're going to make the playoffs next year. With a healthy Alexander Barkov and a healthy Matthew Tkachuk. They might even re-sign Sergei Bobrovsky, extend him to a deal because I think his contract is going to expire at some point, I believe. But let me check on Puckpedia to make sure if I'm right or not. I think I was like, what is his contract say? Okay, he's going to be a UFA at the end of this season. So after this season, and when the playoffs come to a close, he's going to be a UFA. But I think the Panthers are going to be working on a deal to keep him signed to Florida. So I don't think he's going to be going anywhere anytime soon. So yeah, Panthers are going to make the playoffs next year, no doubt in mind. So that's why I keep saying that is a strong might because you're going to be competing with the Panthers, you're going to be competing with the Lightning, you're going to be competing with the Canadiens. I want to say Detroit, but the past 2 seasons, we have seen the Red Wings come close to clinching the playoffs, and then sometime around March or April, that all comes crashing down. So I don't know. But fun while it lasted to see Sabres playoff hockey. Keep your head high. As Tupac will say, keep your head up. Um, because the future is bright for you guys. Don't walk away in shame. Walk away with victory, with excitement, because this is not the end of Sabres playoff hockey. You guys might clinch the playoffs sometime again down the road. We'll just have to see how everything will go. But let's switch gears now. Let's switch from pro hockey to minor league hockey as the new Mid-South Pro Hockey team comes up with a new team name. They are going to be calling themselves the Mid-South Monarchs. And of course, this will be the new team in the Mid-South, in the Memphis and Mid-South area. They're going to be playing in the FPHL. And for those who don't know what that stands for Federal Prospects Hockey League. They're going to be playing in the FPHL, and hockey's going to be making a return to the Memphis Mid-South region for the first time since the departure of the Mississippi River Kings in 2018. I'll show you guys their team colors because their team colors is so sick. It reminds me of LSU team colors and look almost. But yeah, let's show you guys the team colors and the other stuff. So let me share my screen once again. And I am recording on Microsoft Teams for anyone who was wondering. So check this out. So they made the announcement 5 days ago. New team coming to the Mid-South. They're going to be called the Mid-South Monarchs. Take a look at that jersey. Take a look at the color scheme. Like I said, it reminds me a lot of LSU. It reminds me a lot of LSU team colors. And of course, the LSU, they're called the Tigers. Their logo, the Mid-South Monarchs logo, is a lion, and both lions and tigers, they're cats. That's why I kind of said it just kind of reminds me of LSU. But this new team will be playing at the Landers Center in South Haven, Mississippi. Season tickets are available now, so make sure to get your season tickets while you still can. They are available now. Let's see. I'm trying to find their website for you guys. They might have put it in the description, but just in case if they didn't, show you guys their website. So let's see. So this is the website for the new Mid-South Pro Hockey team, which they're going to be called the Monarchs. Season tickets are available now. I think this is where you really have to go to. Trying to find a poll that you can use. So this is their season ticket interest form. Just fill this out, put in your contact information on here, and take a look at it, and you'll be seated for the new Mid-South Pro Hockey team, the Mid-South Monarchs, coming this fall, because that's when they're going to be playing. They're going to be playing this fall, 2026, at the Landers Center in South Haven, Mississippi. It is going to be a fun time if you are living in the Mid-South, and if you're a hockey fan in general. You don't have to be living in Memphis. You don't have to be living in Mississippi. You don't have to be living in Olive Branch. You don't have to be living in South Haven. If you are a hockey fan in general, no matter where you're at, you are excited. You should be excited for this new pro hockey team making a return to the Mid-South, especially considering that hockey is not that popular in the Mid-South and kind of not that popular as it is up. The South is not really that popular for hockey as it is up north, but of course that has changed over the years with the success of the Tampa Bay Lightning, Florida Panthers winning back-to-back Stanley Cups, and then the Nashville Predators having that success as well, then the Dallas Stars. So that's kind of changed over the years with those teams having success, and with hockey, overall growing in the South. You got the college hockey South as a lead, and you got, college hockey teams in the South, like Ole Miss, they have a hockey team, LSU, the South Florida Bulls, the Tampa Spartans, the man, it's a lot. The Florida Gators, and yeah, it's a lot of hockey teams in the South, and college hockey teams rather in the South. I wish the University of Memphis would have a hockey team as well. They did have a hockey team before from 2011 to 2014, but of course, they don't have one now. But hoping with the success that hockey is having in the South, maybe they would consider putting in a hockey team at University of Memphis. And it's not just, college hockey teams that's having success. You got the Southern Professional Hockey League. You got teams like the Knoxville Ice Bears who are popular, the Huntsville Havoc, and these other teams in the SPHL that are, growing among hockey fans living in the South. So they are, over the years, they are growing to have success in the South. And I can't wait for this new pro hockey team in it, but to be in the Mid-South. I'm gonna look up the Landers Center capacity. I think the capacity is for a sporting event, it will be 8,400 seating capacity for a sporting event, but for full house events, it's going to be 10,045 people for that. But for sporting events, it should be up to 8,400. So we need those seats to be filled in October once this new pro hockey team gets into action. So you don't have to be living in the Mid-South to come and support the pro hockey team. I think they're going to be streaming on Flow Hockey since they're going to be playing the FPHL. I think the FPHL is on Flow Hockey. But you can also come out to the games in person, which I think this was me. I would pretty much rather go to the games in person. I will might want to watch some on TV, but also would like to be there in person as well, cheering on the Monarchs. And I think everybody in the Mid-South region is excited to see the return of pro hockey come back to the Mid-South for the first time since 2018. I'm pretty sure they have been waiting a long time to see hockey back in the Mid-South, and they are finally going to get it. But let's switch gears now. Let's go to the conference finals for the Stanley Cup playoffs. We're going to preview the Western and Eastern Conference Finals for you guys. We'll start off with the Western Conference Finals between the VGK Vegas Golden Knights and the Colorado Avalanche. This is going to be a heavyweight matchup between these two teams. Both teams obviously loaded with star power, playoff experience, speed, depth, and good coaching between John Tortorella and Jared Bednar. For the regular season stats, the Avalanche went 2-0-1 in their regular season series against the Golden Knights. The Golden Knights, on the other hand, went 1-1-1 against the Avalanche in their regular season series. Game 1 of this Western Conference Final Series is Wednesday in Colorado at 7:00 p.m. Central Time. This will air on ESPN and ESPN Plus for you guys to watch. Second time these two teams will be going at it in the Stanley Cup playoffs. They met in the 2021 Stanley Cup playoffs back in the second round, where the Golden Knights defeated the Avalanche in 6 games, erasing a 2-0 series deficit. Let's take a look at how both of these teams got to this point. The Golden Knights eliminated the Mammoth in 6 games in the first round, and they eliminated the Ducks in 6 games in the second round. For the Avalanche, they swept the Kings in the first round and eliminated the Minnesota Wild in 5 games, including a come-from-behind comeback win in Game 5 of this second round series for the Avalanche to win and move on to the Western Conference Finals. In the Avalanche, they have been the dominant team all season long. They won the President's Trophy. And they are absolutely buzzing throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. Probably look like the fastest team left. Probably look like the fastest team of this playoffs and of this season so far. And Nathan McKinnon, Nate Dogg, Nate Mack continues to lead the way for the Avs in the Stanley Cup playoffs and has been playing unreal hockey of late. He leads the team in goals with 7 and in points with 13. But overall, for the Avalanche, their transition game, I really like their transition game. They play a highly effective transition game, and their transition game forces defenders into mistakes, and they attack off of turnovers better than almost anyone in the NHL. And with that top 6 group and with the dynamic defensive duo of Cale Makar and Devon Tage, it becomes almost impossible to slow this team down or to slow down for a full 60 minutes. But the Golden Knights might be one of those teams that might be able to step up to the plate and possibly might have a chance at winning them. I'm not saying that they will win against the Avalanche, but it is a possibility. It is a possibility. They have all the momentum on their shoulders entering this series. They lean heavily on playoff experience, depth scoring, and defensive structure throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. And Mitch Marner is leading the way for the Golden Knights. I know it's going to upset a lot of Leafs fans because he didn't have the same success he did in Toronto as he's having right now with the Golden Knights. Yeah, Mitch Marner, he's been playing unreal for the Golden Knights. He is leading the offense. He leads the team in playoffs with 18 points in 12 playoff games this postseason. 7 goals, 11 assists for 18 points in 12 playoff games this postseason. And his chemistry with Jack Eichel, who, don't forget, both Mitch Marner and Jack Eichel were both prospects and were in the 2015 draft class. Obviously, Jack Eichel getting drafted second overall to the Buffalo Sabres, and Mitch Marner getting drafted fourth overall to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So both of these guys were in the 2015 NHL draft class together. So, and their chemistry has completely changed the Golden Knights offense. And what makes Vegas dangerous is that they can beat you in multiple ways. They can slow the game down. They can play physical hockey. They can counterattack. And now with Mitch Marner on the team, they also have elite offense creativity in the lineup. And Pavel Dorofeyev, let's not forget about him because he's been playing unreal hockey for the Golden Knights as well. He certainly has made a name for himself in the Sin City. He leads the Golden Knights with 9 goals this postseason. He has become one of their breakout stars of the Stanley Cup playoffs. But the question is, can the Golden Knights make this? And I know that they will. It's kind of a hypothetical. I mean, not hypothetical. This is can't think of the word for it right now, but um, the question is, and this is probably can't think of the word for it, but the question is, can Vegas survive Colorado's top end talent for 7 games? I can't think of the word for that question, but the question is obvious. Is obvious. Yes, they can. Yes, they can. They can do it. I know that they will. I do see this series going to 7 games. And one other thing that's going to be important for both of these teams is the health of the players on the team. I think I saw an article or saw something that Mark Stone was not going to be available for the Golden Knights heading into game 1 of this Western Conference Final Series. And that's going to, kind of hurt them a little bit. He is their team captain. He is one of their best defensive forwards, and he is a huge playoff performer. And without him, more pressure is going to fall onto Jack Eichel and Mitch Marner offensively and defensively. Next thing is the goaltending matchup. And I feel like, just like for the Sabres and Canadiens series, the only difference is these aren't 2 young teams going at it. But this series is all going to come down to goaltending. And Carter Hart has handled a huge workload for the VGK Vegas Golden Knights, while Colorado is getting some excellent playoff performance from Scott Wedgwood. And Carter Hart, taking a look at his stats, he is 8-4 in the playoffs with a 2.37 goals against average and a .917 save percentage. Scott Wedgwood is 7-1 with a 2.21 goals against average and a .914 save percentage in 8 games. The biggest thing that I will probably watch this series is whether Vegas can slow down Colorado's transition game and their attack to make this a series. And I know that they can. I know that they can. Some of these statements and questions I'm saying is pretty much obvious. It is very obvious. I know that they can. I know that this will be a 7-game series. I think most people, including myself, has the series going to 7 games. If the Golden Knights can and will slow down Colorado's transition game and counterattack, they might have the edge and they can win this series. But if Colorado outplays Vegas in all the stat sheets like shot attempts, shots, puck possession, special teams and stuff, then they will have the advantage of winning this series. Overall thoughts on this one. This is going to be a tight competitive anytime series. It's a coin flip to see who is going to come out on top. I know it's going to be 50-50. Some people might have Vegas winning. Some people might have Colorado winning. If Vegas wins, that's going to upset pretty much everybody, especially if you're a Leafs fan, because Mitch Marner is on that team, and he will be playing in his first ever Stanley Cup final if Vegas were to win. If Colorado will win, then they will have a chance to be the first team since my Chicago Blackhawks did it in the 2012-13 season to win both the President's Trophy and to win the Stanley Cup. They will break that President's Trophy drought if they were to win that series against the Golden Knights. And it's going to be an entertaining series to watch. It's going to be a tight, contested series to watch. But for my prediction, I am taking the Avalanche in 7 games. I'm still sticking with my prediction that I had since the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I can show you guys my playoff bracket. Show you guys my playoff bracket just to see how things are going. But or you can go back and watch my playoff predictions video. But I think it's better if I just show you my bracket. Let's see. So this is my bracket. Well, actually, I haven't even shared my screen yet. My bad. Let's see. Of course, this is my bracket from before. Obviously, there were a little bit of mistakes. A little bit of mistakes in this one. But yeah, this is my bracket. I still do have Colorado and Carolina going to the Stanley Cup final. And then, of course, this is my second chance bracket right here. So this time I didn't have Vegas going to the conference finals just like I did the first time. But yeah, this is my second chance bracket. So I got most of everything right. I probably still should have stuck with Vegas beating Anaheim in my second chance playoff bracket, but I didn't, unfortunately. But yeah, Avalanche in 7 games against the Golden Knights. That is my Western Conference final prediction. Let me know you guys' thoughts on that in the comments down below. Let's go ahead and go to the Eastern Conference final now between the Montreal Canadiens and the Carolina Hurricanes. So it's going to be a young, talented Montreal Canadiens team against a powerhouse offensive Carolina Hurricanes team. The shocking thing about this is, and I probably will say it again throughout this segment, this preview, the Eastern Conference Finals, is that Montreal went 3-0-0 in the regular season against the Carolina Hurricanes. That is crazy to think about. But this is the playoffs. This is not the regular season. I don't think it's going to be the same result. It shouldn't be the same result. It should not be the same result. So, but I kind of found that stat um, really amusing, because I did not know that. I thought because both these teams, well, I guess Eastern Conference teams play each other like 3-4 times. Whereas if it was a West versus East team, they would play each other 2 times. But Eastern Conference teams play each other like 3-4 times for a season. So, and they went 3-0-0 this season against Carolina. That is crazy. Game 1 of this Eastern Conference Finals series will be on Thursday at 7:00 p.m. Central Time. That game will air on TNT, 2TV, and HBO Max for you guys to watch. This is the first time since 2002 that these two teams are going to be squaring off in the Stanley Cup playoffs, in which not the Canadiens, the Hurricanes beat the Canadiens in 6 games of the second round of the 2002 Stanley Cup playoffs. Overall, though, if you would account the Hartford Whalers, because before the Carolina Hurricanes were the Carolina Hurricanes, they were called the Hartford Whalers. So if you would account the Hartford Whalers and Carolina Hurricanes, overall, this is the 5th time that these two teams will be meeting each other in the Stanley Cup playoffs, in which the Canadiens have won 4 out of the 5 meetings. They won in 1986, 1988, 1989, and 1992 against the Hartford Whalers before they moved to Carolina. And the Whalers Hurricanes franchise did not win a single playoff series against Montreal in that era. In that era specifically, they have not won a playoff series against the Canadiens in that era. Carolina only won, this is a different era, obviously, in 2002. That was the only time they won against Montreal in a playoff series. But let's take a look at how these two teams got here. The Canadiens beat the Lightning in 7 games in the first round, and they do the same thing against the Sabres, beating them in 7 games in the second round, thanks to 2 game-winning goals by Alex Newhook. Of all people. Alex Newhook. Nobody had him, or most people didn't have him, coming up clutch for the Canadiens in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So it's very impressive to see how Alex Newhook is playing. For the Hurricanes, though, they sweep both the Senators and Flyers in their first and second round playoff series to get to this point, remaining a perfect 8-0 record in the Stanley Cup playoffs right now. Fun fact: during Coach Rod Brendamore's coaching tenure with the Carolina Hurricanes, and he's been with them for 8 seasons now. This is the 4th time that the Canes have reached the conference finals during his coaching tenure. They done it in 2019, 2023, 2025, and now 2026. They have not reached the Stanley Cup finals since winning their first and only Stanley Cup in 2006, and that was against the Edmonton Oilers. Overall, though, they have been playing unreal hockey in the playoffs, and they've been playing unreal these past few years. Their defensive structure remains elite. Their forechecking skill is top notch, and they just been the better team so far throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. And Freddie Anderson has been killing it between the pipes for the Canes. He is a perfect 8-0 with a 1.12 goals against average and a .950 save percentage and 2 shutouts. And fun fact, he has yet to allow more than 2 goals in a game throughout the postseason. So crazy stat to think about. The odd storyline going into this game, though, for the Canes is the rest factor, because this team has had 9 days off since sweeping the Philadelphia Flyers in the second round. So I don't know if they're going to be ready to go against Montreal, because they have not been playing hockey. They nearly had a week off. Because obviously they swept the Flyers, and they haven't been on the ice of late. Or at least we just haven't seen them on the ice. They might maybe have been practicing a little bit. We don't know. But those are, if they have been practicing, we haven't seen it because obviously curtains are closed, and the NHL hasn't put out any behind the scenes videos of Hurricanes still practicing with the 9 days off. But yeah, I don't know if that rest factor is going to come into play. Does that rest factor help them stay fresh and healthy, or does it hurt their rhythm and momentum against a Canadiens team who's been playing of late in these Stanley Cup playoffs? They have been playing consistently, and they have been on their toes throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Hurricanes, they just had a layoff, and I don't know if that's going to hurt them or maybe help them. But we'll just have to see how it will go. And like I said, the interesting part of the storyline is the Canadiens going 3-0 against the Carolina Hurricanes in the regular season. But the playoffs is a different breed. And not to mention that the Hurricanes were outscored by the Canadiens. Canadiens outscored the Hurricanes 15-8 in the regular season, but the playoffs is a different breed. It is a different time. It's not the regular season. Hurricanes depth still remains elite. The defensive structure is still good. They got good goaltending in Freddie Anderson. But still, Montreal speed and confidence could absolutely make this dangerous for the Carolina Hurricanes. And if the Canadiens can steal the early momentum, which that may or may not happen, we'll just have to see how this will go. Another question is, can the Montreal Canadiens spark their offensive creativity in this series against Carolina? Because if they can, and if Jakub Dobes remains great, If he plays well against Freddie Anderson, Canadians will have a chance at winning this series. But if not, and if the Hurricanes take over this one, just like they have in the series against the Senators and Flyers, this could be another series win for the Hurricanes, and they can go back to the Stanley Cup final for the first time since 2006. We'll just have to see how that series will go. But my prediction, I am taking the Hurricanes in 6 games. I'm taking the Canes in 6 games to win this series against Montreal, which I'm pretty sure Montreal doesn't mind most people choosing Carolina over them. Jakub Dobes even said it himself on SportsCenter on Monday following the Canadiens' 3-2 overtime win over the Carolina Hurricanes. Jakub Dobes said it himself on SportsCenter. They like being the underdogs. They love to be the underdogs. They don't mind being the underdogs in this one. They have been the underdogs so far throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's not new to them. They don't mind playing that way. So, yeah. But those are my thoughts on the conference finals. That's all I have for the conference finals previews. So, just to recap, Avalanche in 7 games against the Golden Knights. Hurricanes in 6 games against the Canadiens. Let me know you guys' thoughts about that in the comments down below. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe button on YouTube, and make sure to follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Nonetheless, hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day. Keep God first as always. Be blessed. I'll see you guys next time for another episode of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. Take care.